Hollywood loves to sell perfection, dazzling smiles, generous hearts, and glamorous lives that seem too good to be true. But behind the polished interviews and red carpet charm, some of the industry's biggest stars were hiding something much darker. Co-stars avoided them, crew members feared them, and even close friends admitted they could be downright cruel. These weren't just divas or difficult professionals. They were bullies, egomaniacs, and manipulators who treated everyone around them like disposable extras in their own movie. So who were the actors who made Hollywood hell for everyone else? And how did they manage to keep their ugly behavior hidden for so long? Tonight, we count down the stories of 15 Hollywood icons who were adored on screen but despised in real life. 15. Christian Bale. To audiences, Christian Bale is the picture of intensity, the kind of actor who vanishes into every role, from tortured heroes to monstrous villains. But that same intensity, when the cameras stop rolling, can turn volcanic. Stories from the sets of his films reveal a man whose obsession with control often crossed the line into outright cruelty. The most infamous incident came during the filming of Terminator Salvation, when a leaked audio recording captured Bale unleashing a several-minute tirade of profanity and insults at a crew member who accidentally stepped into his sightline. The rant was so brutal it became legendary, not for its creativity, but for the sheer venom in his voice. Crew members described the atmosphere as walking on eggshells, terrified that the star might erupt again at any second. It wasn't a one-time meltdown. Directors and co-stars have quietly admitted that Bale's temper could dominate a production. He demanded total silence on set, berated colleagues he deemed unprofessional, and carried his intensity long after the director called "cut." Even in personal life, he's been accused of volatile outbursts, including a family dispute that briefly made headlines years ago. What makes it more disturbing is how easily Bale can switch back to charm during interviews, articulate, humble, even self-effacing. It's as if the monster lives just beneath the surface, waiting for the smallest trigger. His defenders argue that such rage is the price of artistic genius. But to those who've worked under him, it feels less like passion and more like power, the kind that feeds on fear. Christian Bale may be one of the greatest actors of his generation, but off-camera, many who've crossed his path remember him for something else entirely, being one of Hollywood's most intimidating jerks. 14. Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase was once the face of American comedy, tall, charming, and effortlessly funny. From Saturday Night Live to National Lampoon's Vacation, he defined the laid-back, sarcastic humor of a generation. But behind the smirk that made him famous was a reputation for arrogance and cruelty that drove nearly everyone around him insane. Colleagues from his SNL days tell stories that sound more like horror than humor. He mocked castmates, insulted writers, and belittled the very people who helped build his fame. When he returned to host the show years later, the crew reportedly dreaded his presence. One SNL writer described him bluntly, "the meanest person I've ever met." There were even physical altercations, most notoriously with Bill Murray, whose patience with Chase's arrogance finally snapped backstage before a live show. And it didn't end there. Decades later, on the set of the hit series, Community, history repeated itself. Chase clashed constantly with creator Dan Harmon and the cast, calling the writing garbage and referring to his colleagues with shocking insults. Donald Glover later revealed that Chase made racially insensitive comments toward him, reducing moments of laughter into scenes of tension. The show's success couldn't hide the discomfort, and eventually, Chase was forced out again, burned by his own behavior. Off-set, his reputation didn't improve. Reporters and crew alike described him as dismissive, condescending, and shockingly unaware of how much he alienated people. Once celebrated as a comedic genius, Chevy Chase became a cautionary tale, proof that wit without humility curdles into venom. Today, when Hollywood remembers him, it's not for his quick one-liners or physical comedy, but for how thoroughly he managed to alienate nearly everyone who once admired him. 13. Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis built his empire on charisma, the smirking, wisecracking everyman who could save the world with a smirk and a cigarette. But beneath the cool exterior, colleagues paint a very different portrait, one of ego, stubbornness, and a relentless sense of superiority that made working with him nearly impossible. During the height of his fame in the Die Hard era, Willis became infamous for his attitude on set. Directors whispered that he second-guessed creative decisions, refused to take direction, and treated co-stars as props in The Bruce Willis Show. Kevin Smith, who directed him in Cop Out, later described the experience as soul-crushing, saying, "Willis made the entire production miserable." Smith claimed that the star's ego was so out of control that even simple scenes turned into battles of will. His difficult reputation extended far beyond one film. Crew members said he often arrived late, dismissed instructions, and demanded changes that made production grind to a halt. He reportedly refused to speak to certain actors directly, forcing assistants to deliver messages between takes. On one project, a cinematographer admitted that Willis's arrogance sucked the air out of the room. Even among peers, his reputation was complicated. Some admired his talent and discipline, but many quietly avoided him. By the 2000s, his name became shorthand in the industry for brilliant but unbearable. As one producer put it, "You hire Bruce for the movie, and then you pray you survive the experience." The irony is that his tough guy persona, the unbreakable cop, the sardonic hero, wasn't just a character. It was who he was, even when the cameras stopped. And while illness later softened public perception of him, those who worked alongside Bruce Willis still remember the truth behind the swagger. A man whose charm vanished the moment someone dared to challenge his authority. 12. Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe has long been known as one of Hollywood's most magnetic performers, a man whose presence on screen can dominate an entire film. Yet off-camera, that same commanding energy often transformed into something darker: aggression, volatility, and a temper that made him one of the most feared figures in the industry. In his prime, Crowe was celebrated for his raw, explosive performances in films like Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind. But what the public didn't see were the explosions that happened when the cameras stopped. He earned a reputation for losing control in spectacular fashion, not metaphorically, but literally. In 2005, he famously threw a phone at a hotel employee in New York, an act that led to his arrest and international headlines. It wasn't an isolated incident. Reports of violent outbursts followed him for years, from shouting matches with producers to fistfights at parties. Directors who worked with him have described an actor obsessed with dominance. On set, he demanded creative control, rewrote lines without permission, and reacted furiously if anyone questioned him. His intensity, which fueled his performances, also fueled his rage. Even co-stars admired and feared him in equal measure. Some said working with Crowe felt like walking into battle. You might win the scene, but you'd leave exhausted and bruised. Yet what makes Crowe's case so striking is his duality. When calm, he can be intelligent, reflective, even poetic, a man who quotes literature and speaks passionately about art. But when provoked, that sophistication disappears, replaced by raw fury. It's as if the gladiator never left the arena. Over time, his career cooled, not because of a lack of talent, but because too many people simply didn't want to face his wrath again. Russell Crowe may be one of cinema's great warriors, but off-screen, his battles were often with the people trying to help him. 11. Mike Myers. Mike Myers built a career out of making people laugh, the rubber-faced, quick-witted genius behind Austin Powers' Wayne's World and the voice of Shrek. But behind the scenes, the man who gave life to so many lovable oddballs was often described as controlling, cold, and astonishingly difficult to work with. Crew members from his films have called him a nightmare, a perfectionist to the point of tyranny. Myers wasn't just hands-on, he wanted his fingerprints on everything: the lighting, the dialogue, even the catering. He reportedly fired people on the spot for the smallest mistakes, and demanded reshoots when jokes didn't land exactly as he wanted. To those who adored his comedic brilliance, that might sound like passion. But to those who worked under him, it felt more like emotional warfare. The stories became industry legend. During the production of Wayne's World, Myers allegedly refused to continue filming because the crew served buttered bagels instead of the plain ones he requested. Dana Carvey, his co-star, later admitted their friendship deteriorated due to Myers' ego and possessiveness over creative control. Others who worked with him on Austin Powers described a man obsessed with details yet incapable of kindness, a boss who crushed morale while chasing his perfect punchline. Even the Shrek saga wasn't safe from the drama. Myers famously demanded the entire film be re-recorded after deciding to change the character's accent to Scottish, costing the studio millions. The move infuriated producers and animators alike, but became a perfect snapshot of his personality. Unpredictable, uncompromising, and utterly convinced he knew best. Over the years, his career slowed, and insiders whispered that it wasn't due to fading talent, it was because Hollywood had simply run out of patience. Mike Myers' comedic mind made him a legend, but his behavior made him an exile. For someone who spent his career parodying egomaniacs, it's a dark twist that he ended up becoming one himself. 10. Edward Norton. Edward Norton is often hailed as one of the most intelligent actors of his generation, articulate, meticulous, and capable of disappearing entirely into his characters. But those same qualities that make him a great performer have also earned him a reputation as one of Hollywood's most insufferable perfectionists. Behind the scenes, Norton's desire for control has derailed productions, infuriated directors, and left entire crews exhausted by his endless interference. It started early in his career. After American History X became a critical success, Norton clashed fiercely with its director Tony Kaye over the final edit. Norton reportedly recut the film himself, locking Kaye out of the editing room and submitting his own version to the studio. The director was so enraged that he publicly disowned the movie, even though Norton's cut went on to receive an Academy Award nomination. The episode cemented his image as brilliant but impossible. That pattern continued. On The Incredible Hulk, Norton allegedly rewrote huge portions of the script without approval and argued constantly with Marvel executives over tone and character development. He was said to have fought for a darker, more complex version of the story, while the studio wanted a straightforward blockbuster. The clash grew so heated that when it came time for the Avengers, Marvel replaced him without hesitation. Their statement was diplomatic, but clear they needed an actor who could collaborate. Those who've worked with Norton describe him as intimidatingly intelligent, yet oblivious to how his intensity crushes others. He questions everything, corrects everyone, and insists on micromanaging every frame. To some, that's evidence of genius. To others, it's pure arrogance. Off-set, he presents himself as thoughtful, environmentally conscious, and low-profile, a man who'd rather talk about sustainability than fame. But within Hollywood, his name became shorthand for a creative control freak, a reminder that brilliance without humility often leaves a trail of resentment. Edward Norton may be one of the finest actors alive, but for many in the business, he's also one of the hardest to survive. 9. Katherine Heigl. Katherine Heigl once seemed destined to become Hollywood's next golden girl, stunning, witty, and effortlessly likable. From Grey's Anatomy to Knocked Up, she charmed audiences and critics alike. But as her fame skyrocketed, so did her reputation for being one of the most unpleasant and ungrateful people in the industry. What began as whispers about attitude issues quickly became a full-blown Hollywood cautionary tale. The first cracks appeared when Heigl publicly criticized Knocked Up, the very movie that made her a star. In interviews, she called it sexist, dismissing the film as portraying women as nags and men as idiots, comments that blindsided director Judd Apatow and co-star Seth Rogen. Both were reportedly stunned, given that Heigl had praised the film before its release. Her remarks were seen as a betrayal, and it was the start of her long feud with Hollywood's inner circle. Then came the controversy with Grey's Anatomy. After winning an Emmy for her performance, Heigl withdrew her name from consideration the following year, claiming she wasn't given material worthy of nomination. The statement, seen by many as a direct insult to the show's writers, infuriated the cast and crew. Creator Shonda Rhimes allegedly had enough of the drama and eventually wrote her character off the series altogether. Behind the scenes, producers described Heigl as demanding and combative, with her mother, who doubled as her manager, often making impossible demands during negotiations. Directors complained she questioned everything, refused to do press, and treated colleagues with icy disdain. As one insider put it, she burned every bridge she crossed and then kept walking. By the mid-2010s, the industry had quietly turned its back on her. Her star power faded, her box office appeal vanished, and the offers dried up. Today, Katherine Heigl speaks openly about how her behavior and the media backlash damaged her career. But for many in Hollywood, the damage was done. She had gone from America's sweetheart to one of its most notorious jerks. 8. Sean Penn. Few actors in Hollywood command the kind of respect Sean Penn does. Two-time Oscar winner, humanitarian, and political activist. Yet behind the accolades lies a darker portrait, a man known for his volatility, arrogance, and explosive temper. Penn's career has long been shadowed by stories of aggression both on and off set, creating a legacy as one of the most talented and most notoriously difficult figures in the industry. His troubles started early. In the 1980s, Penn's relationship with pop icon Madonna was a tabloid obsession and a nightmare behind closed doors. Their marriage was marred by allegations of physical abuse and violent confrontations. Though Madonna later softened her public stance, police reports from the time described disturbing incidents that solidified Penn's reputation as a Hollywood hothead. On film sets, he wasn't much different. Directors and crew members recalled an actor so consumed by his own ego that collaboration felt impossible. He fought over creative direction, insulted journalists, and even got into physical fights with photographers. During one infamous incident, he attacked a paparazzo, breaking the man's camera and earning jail time. The press began calling him the angry young man of Hollywood, a title he seemed to embrace. Even as his activism grew, his temper never really faded. In interviews, he often came across as condescending, treating reporters as nuisances rather than professionals. Co-stars described him as brilliant but unbearable, with one fellow actor saying that Penn could drain the life from a room just by walking in. And yet, Penn remains a paradox. For every tale of rage and cruelty, there's a story of compassion, his rescue work in Haiti, his outspoken advocacy for humanitarian causes. It's this contradiction that makes him so compelling and frustrating at once, a man capable of both greatness and cruelty, kindness and contempt. Sean Penn's legacy will always be divided between the humanitarian the world wants to see and the volatile jerk Hollywood has come to know all too well. 7. Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal once ruled the action genre, a martial arts master turned movie star whose stoic presence and real-life fighting skills made him a legend of the late 80s and 90s. But while his on-screen persona was calm and disciplined, his off-screen behavior told a very different story. Behind the lens, Seagal's reputation became one of arrogance, deceit, and predatory misconduct, leaving a long trail of co-stars and colleagues who wanted nothing more than to never work with him again. It started with ego. Directors and stunt coordinators described him as a nightmare, a man who refused to take direction, constantly bragged about his skills, and humiliated others to assert dominance. During fight scenes, Seagal would often accidentally injure stuntmen, insisting it made the movie more realistic. One legendary story claims he challenged a seasoned martial artist on set to prove his invincibility and ended up being choked unconscious in front of the entire crew. But arrogance was only one layer. Over the years, numerous women accused Seagal of sexual harassment and assault, many recounting chillingly similar stories of being lured to his trailer or home under false pretenses. These accusations dated back decades and involved actresses, assistants, and models, yet Seagal always denied wrongdoing. Still, the sheer number of allegations turned him into a pariah in Hollywood, and studios quietly stopped calling. His co-stars painted an equally unpleasant picture. John Leguizamo recalled being physically shoved by Seagal on set after joking about his ego. Others described him as delusional, constantly making up wild claims about his supposed work with the CIA or his secret missions in Russia. Even his later friendship with controversial political figures only deepened his image as an unpredictable, self-absorbed loner. By the time his film career faded, Seagal had become almost a caricature, a once promising star undone by his own lies and cruelty. Today, he remains a symbol of wasted potential, a man who mistook fear for respect and never realized how despised he had become. In Hollywood lore, Steven Seagal isn't remembered as the ultimate action hero, but as one of the most notoriously unpleasant men the industry ever produced. 6. Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin's career has spanned decades, from the cool sophistication of The Hunt for Red October to the sharp comedy of 30 Rock. He's charming, articulate, and undeniably talented. Yet behind that magnetic presence lies a reputation for rage, arrogance, and an inability to control his temper, both on and off the set. Baldwin's brilliance often came hand in hand with chaos, earning him as many headlines for his behavior as for his performances. His infamous outbursts became Hollywood legend. There was the time he was removed from an airplane for refusing to stop playing a game on his phone and then berated the airline publicly afterward. Or the recorded voicemail in which he called his 11-year-old daughter a rude, thoughtless little pig, a message that shocked the world and painted him as an emotionally volatile father. Baldwin later apologized, but the damage to his image was irreversible. On set, things weren't much better. Crew members and co-stars have spoken about his unpredictable mood swings. Friendly one moment, explosive the next. He reportedly clashed with directors, camera operators, and fellow actors alike. One colleague from 30 Rock called him brilliant but terrifying, describing how the entire set adjusted itself to avoid triggering his temper. Even Tina Fey, who frequently defended him, admitted that his energy could be volatile. End of set. The most tragic chapter of Baldwin's career came with the Rust shooting incident in 2021, when a prop gun he was handling discharged, killing cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Though the event was ruled an accident, Baldwin's response, public defensiveness, finger-pointing, and an emotional but inconsistent narrative reignited long-standing criticism about his inability to take responsibility. Outside of acting, his clashes with paparazzi and journalists have been nearly constant. He's punched photographers, insulted reporters, and engaged in shouting matches in public. Baldwin often blames the media for his reputation, yet his own behavior continues to feed it. To his fans, Alec Baldwin remains a magnetic, deeply gifted performer. But to many who've crossed paths with him, he's something else entirely. A man whose talent is constantly overshadowed by his temper. For Baldwin, the greatest battle was never with the roles he played, it was with himself. 5. Jared Leto. Jared Leto is a man of extremes, a rock star, Oscar-winning actor, and self-proclaimed visionary. To the public, he's mysterious and artistic, someone who disappears into every role with fearless commitment. But to those who've actually worked with him, that same commitment often crosses into cruelty, manipulation, and sheer arrogance. Over the years, Leto's behavior has earned him a reputation not as an artistic genius, but as one of Hollywood's strangest and most unbearable egomaniacs. His antics during Suicide Squad are now infamous. Determined to embody the Joker, Leto reportedly sent his co-stars grotesque gifts, used condoms, dead rats, bullets, and other disturbing items, all under the excuse of method acting. While he claimed it was to help everyone feel the madness, most of the cast found it repulsive. Viola Davis later admitted she nearly hit him with a chair. Margot Robbie described being unsettled, and even the director confessed that Leto's behavior became a nightmare for the crew. But Suicide Squad wasn't an isolated case. On other sets, Leto was accused of ignoring direction, refusing to break character, and making co-stars uncomfortable with his extreme methods. Some crew members claimed he used his fame to manipulate others, blurring the line between performance and self-importance. His band, 30 Seconds to Mars, hasn't escaped the controversy. Either fans and former collaborators have accused him of cultivating a cult-like atmosphere, complete with cryptic retreats and exaggerated messianic behavior. Outside of work, Leto's arrogance has shown up in interviews and public appearances. He often dismisses criticism as ignorance and portrays himself as a misunderstood prophet of art. When asked about backlash, he smirks and deflects, as if controversy is beneath him. Yet that smug detachment is precisely what infuriates those who've suffered his ego firsthand. Jared Leto's defenders insist his eccentricity is part of his genius, that his shocking behavior fuels unforgettable performances. But for many who've shared a set with him, the truth is simpler and far less glamorous. He's not a tortured artist, just a jerk hiding behind the excuse of art. 4. Bill Murray. Bill Murray is one of the most beloved comedians in Hollywood history, a man whose offbeat charm and dry wit have made him an icon for generations. From Ghostbusters to Groundhog Day and Lost in Translation, he built a reputation as the ultimate cool guy of comedy. But behind the lovable goofball persona lies a far less endearing truth. Many who've worked with Murray describe him not as a laid-back genius, but as an unpredictable bully. For decades, stories have circulated about his erratic behavior on and off set. On Charlie's Angels, Murray allegedly insulted co-star Lucy Liu so viciously during filming that she confronted him and demanded he stop. She later confirmed that he used inexcusable language, saying she stood up for herself only after being pushed too far. On What About Bob, director Frank Oz and co-star Richard Dreyfuss both spoke of his volatility. Dreyfuss claimed Murray threw an ashtray at his head during a heated argument. Even directors who adore his talent admit he's difficult. Harold Ramis, Murray's longtime collaborator, and the man behind Ghostbusters eventually cut ties with him after years of fighting. Their friendship, one of the most legendary in comedy, ended because Murray's hostility became unbearable. It wasn't until Ramis's death that Murray tried to reconcile, showing up at his funeral unannounced. His temper and dismissiveness weren't limited to co-stars. Crew members reported that he often showed up late, refused to follow scripts, and treated people he deemed beneath him with contempt. A younger generation of actors later experienced the same thing. Several women accused him of inappropriate touching and unprofessional conduct on set in the 2020s, forcing productions to pause and sparking industry-wide debate about whether his eccentricity had gone too far. Bill Murray's brilliance is undeniable. His comedic instincts are almost mythical. But so is his cruelty. The same spontaneity that made him magnetic on screen often made him monstrous behind it. In the end, Murray remains a paradox, the funny man everyone wants to love, and the colleague almost no one wants to work with twice. 3. Christian Slater. Christian Slater was once Hollywood's next big thing, the handsome rebel with the dangerous grin, hailed as the new Jack Nicholson when he broke through in the late 1980s. But while audiences were captivated by his brooding charm, the industry quickly learned that Slater's off-screen personality was far from charming. Behind the fame was a young actor whose arrogance, addictions, and violent temper made him one of the most disliked figures of his era. During the peak of his career, Slater's bad boy image wasn't just a marketing angle, it was reality. He was arrested multiple times for assault, drunk driving, and drug possession. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in the mid-90s when he was convicted of assaulting his girlfriend and a police officer during a cocaine-fueled breakdown. He spent time in jail and rehab, but insiders said the real issue wasn't the drugs, it was his attitude. Directors and co-stars described Slater as moody, self-absorbed, and dismissive of anyone he considered beneath him. On set, he would show up late, challenge directors, and storm off during takes if things didn't go his way. Crew members recalled the atmosphere as toxic, fueled by Slater's sense of entitlement and erratic behavior. Even as he began to rebuild his reputation later in life, those who worked with him in his prime remembered him as the kind of star who made everyone else's job harder. What made it worse was his habit of blaming others. When his career began to crumble in the late 90s, Slater insisted the press had turned against him, refusing to acknowledge that his own actions had burned every bridge in sight. His career soon collapsed under the weight of his ego, forcing him into smaller roles and independent films. To his credit, Slater eventually sought sobriety and redemption, reinventing himself as a calmer, more reflective man. But the scars of his past remain a reminder of how quickly charisma can curdle into cruelty. For years, Christian Slater wasn't just playing the bad boy of Hollywood, he was living it, and everyone around him paid the price. 2. Mel Gibson. Few names in Hollywood have fallen harder than Mel Gibson's. Once celebrated as one of the industry's most bankable leading men, the brave heart of blockbuster cinema, Gibson's reputation imploded under the weight of his own anger, prejudice, and abuse. What began as whispers of arrogance eventually exploded into full-blown scandal, exposing a man whose real-life behavior was far more horrifying than any villain he ever played. Throughout the 1990s, Gibson was adored for his charm and humor, but those who worked closely with him saw something darker. Crew members described him as temperamental and controlling, prone to tirades when things didn't go his way. His sense of humor often veered into cruelty, laced with misogynistic or homophobic remarks that left colleagues uncomfortable. For years, studios brushed it off as eccentricity, until the mask finally slipped. In the mid-2000s, Gibson's demons burst into public view. Arrested for drunk driving, he launched into a now infamous anti-Semitic rant against the arresting officer, a tirade so vile it shocked even his longtime defenders. Just when it seemed his career might recover, recorded phone calls with his then-girlfriend leaked, revealing Gibson screaming racist slurs, threats, and graphic abuse. The world heard, unfiltered, what insiders had quietly endured for years. After the tape surfaced, Gibson's Hollywood exile was swift. Studios distanced themselves, agents dropped him, and actors who once called him a friend went silent. Even his attempts at apology often came across as self-pity rather than remorse. Though he eventually found his way back behind the camera with Hacksaw Ridge, his redemption has never been complete for many. The damage was too deep. Behind the lens, Gibson's talent as a filmmaker is undeniable. But for those who witnessed his cruelty, that brilliance means little compared to the fear and disgust he inspired. Mel Gibson's downfall isn't just one of Hollywood's most shocking, it's one of its most deserved. 1. James Cameron. James Cameron is often hailed as a visionary, the mastermind behind Titanic, Avatar, and Terminator, a director whose ambition reshaped modern cinema. But within Hollywood, that genius comes with a chilling reputation. For decades, Cameron has been described as one of the most tyrannical, demanding, and emotionally brutal figures ever to call action. To many who have worked under him, he's not a creative genius, he's a dictator in a director's chair. On his sets, fear ruled. Actors, crew members, and even veteran technicians have all told similar stories. Cameron pushing people to their breaking point, screaming at subordinates, and creating an atmosphere so intense that exhaustion and tears were part of the daily routine. During The Abyss, multiple crew members reportedly walked off set after enduring endless 12-hour underwater shoots and verbal abuse. Ed Harris later admitted he never wanted to work with Cameron again, recalling moments when he was pushed past physical safety for the sake of a scene. Things weren't better on Titanic. Though the film went on to make history, it nearly broke its cast and crew. Kate Winslet said she was genuinely terrified of Cameron and described him as having a temper like you wouldn't believe. Crew members suffered injuries, hypothermia, and emotional breakdowns, all while Cameron berated anyone who slowed down his schedule. To him, the suffering was part of the art. To everyone else, it was trauma disguised as work ethic. Even in the 21st century, with his Avatar franchise dominating box offices, Cameron's reputation for arrogance hasn't softened. He dismisses critics as not intelligent enough to understand his vision and rarely accepts fault for anything. Interviews reveal flashes of the same impatience and condescension his teams have long endured. Yet, for all his cruelty, Cameron remains a paradox. His films inspire millions, but his leadership scars those who help create them. In the end, James Cameron stands as the ultimate Hollywood contradiction, a man who builds worlds of wonder on screen while making the real world around him unbearable. For many who've lived through his productions, the legend of James Cameron isn't just one of cinematic brilliance, it's one of absolute tyranny. Hollywood loves its legends, the charming rebels, the misunderstood geniuses, the tortured artists. But when the cameras stop rolling, the truth isn't always pretty. Behind every dazzling smile and iconic performance lies a person capable of cruelty, ego, and deception. These 15 stars remind us that fame doesn't make someone kind, it only hides the darkness long enough for the world to fall in love. In the end, talent can make you famous. But how you treat people decides how you're remembered.